Welcome to HCA Talks Health. I'm Zena Le Roux, your host, and today I'm talking to Daniela Araújo. And she's a mindfulness and a mindful eating teacher and a trainer. She's also a narrative therapist and an anthropologist. And she's been working in the field of eating disorders since 2001. And she's also the co-vice chair of the Center for Mindful Eating. So thanks for being here today, Daniela.
Thank you, Zena, for having me here.
Yeah,
It's a
so
pleasure.
yeah, I'm really curious about the work that you're doing, and I know that it's a very important subject. I mean, you've been working in the field of eating disorders for many years now. So I'm really curious about this. Can you maybe tell us more about what your main findings are around why people tend to have complex relationships with food? Why does this happen? Can you give us a little bit of an idea of how this happens?
I began my research on the field of eating disorders, looking for the social and cultural aspects of it, exactly because of that question. I was very interested in understanding better the way that our culture is a very fertile ground for developing an eating disorder.
Mm.
And yeah, and there are many things in our current ways of living and thinking about eating and our bodies that makes really easy to develop an eating disorder and also really hard to get over one.
Oh, yes, yes. And is this what is known as, or part of the conditioning, right, in our culture? Would you say that this is part of also the diet, and fitness industries or culture that plays a role?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And
And
okay, keep asking.
yes, no. So I'm thinking about how specifically the diet culture, how it impacts the way we see ourselves and how it impacts the relationship that we have with our bodies.
Yes. And I think including the discourses on healthy eating, they tend to promote disordered eating, which is not cannot be like a full blown diagnostic of an eating disorder. But the result is that most people have some sort of disordered eating patterns these days, especially those who are concerned with eating healthier, which is a contradiction. We try to get healthier, but we end up with more unhealthy relationships with our bodies and our eating,
Mm,
which is a paradox.
absolutely. So how would you define disordered eating? So someone trying to follow maybe some healthy principles and then it turns into disordered eating. I guess there's a fine line.
Um, for instance, the way we judge and feel guilty about eating, or that we feel that we cannot trust what our body tells us in terms of what the body wants to eat, and seeing food as dangerous or temptation or something that we should mistrust. These are all examples of disordered eating, feeling that we have to, for instance, uh, go to the gym and exercise to make up for what we have eaten, feelings that we have to be watchful all the time and polish our eating.
Mm.
These are considered normal or even healthy behaviors, but they are actually disordered.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess one of the main things, and yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the main things that drives this is the fact that many people see their body only or more for its ornamental value, right? Instead of its functional value or what it's doing for us, And I think Often when we are just focusing on this one area, I mean, it's such a narrow view of the bigger human being. Right. So do you find that this is the case, and or that it's adding to the problem, the fact that we've got this ornamental view?
Yes, but it's also a specific type of ornamental view. And the functional value can also be dangerous, because if we think of the body as a machine that needs to be highly efficient and work perfectly all the time, instead of this wonderful side of life as it happens in all its glory and imperfection, we can also develop a harmful or disordered relationship with our bodies or our performance.
Mm.
So I think both can be problematic depending on more subtle aspects of how we see it.
Mm.
Because the body can also be seen as a beautiful thing, which would be ornamental,
Yeah.
but it's not just that. When it becomes the main goal of our bodies, that's when it becomes problematic. When
Yes.
the body is in service of something that we need to strive to be, rather than just the sight of being
Uh-huh.
alive.
Yes, yes. So I hear you, whether even in a functional view could be dangerous in the sense of, where people tend to maybe overtrain, or want to just keep on exercising because it's functional, right? But still, you're not necessarily respecting the body for what it is, right? And I love that. So your view is more on, instead of the wanting the body to be something different than it currently is, you're focusing on what already is, and just the sense of being alive, right? Yeah.
Yes, because regardless of what is happening in our bodies, the life in our bodies is doing its best to keep us alive. So when we start judging the body as something that is in the way of something else, rather than a support of our existence, that's when we tend to get in trouble.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And what type of harm do you see is this type of thinking causing in life? I know you've mentioned, of course, eating disorders, but what else? What type of harm is it causing in this world?
I think it causes a lot of anxiety
Mm,
and a feeling of being unsafe in our own bodies.
mm, mm,
It's like a common theme of conversations, of casual conversations, all the many thousands of things that we are supposed to be doing in order to maintain or improve our bodies all the time.
mm. Yeah,
It creates a lot of suffering in many ways.
yeah. And I think that is what creates, like you said, it's that feeling of never being enough, right? Always wanting to be something different. So, how would you recommend we start to change our thinking around this, around the diet industry, but also these societal ideals? Because, like you said, it's a conversation that we come across almost on a daily basis. This is things people talk about on a daily basis. So, how do we start to shift our thinking?
One of the things that I find most helpful in my experience, and also in the experience of my students and my clients, is developing a compassionate awareness, not only of our bodies and our needs and ourselves, but also some critical thinking about the effects of all these ideas and these tendencies that we have in our culture. What do they do to us? Do they actually improve our lives? Or they just create more trouble, more striving, more suffering?
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to do, because it's a very strong bias that we all have. Because we are cultural beings, we cannot live without our culture. It's there for a reason. It's to support us in life. But sometimes culture has some ideas that are not that helpful. So becoming aware of that.
So I think that's the first step in most journeys is that awareness, right? Just at least knowing, okay, you know, this is impacting me and it's possibly causing a lot of suffering in my life. So, you know, having that self-compassion, I think after the awareness is really creating some self-compassion. But I know that this idea of self-compassion is quite problematic for some people, right? The idea of accepting yourself exactly the way you are. And why do you think this is? Why do you think that it's such a difficult concept for many people to entertain?
First, because we live in a world that is so focused on results. And having good results and great performance is the most important thing. And we also are not very compassionate in that direction. And we have this idea that if we become more compassionate, it will somehow stop us from achieving results or a good performance, that it would be like compassion is mistaken for self-indulgence, or for, you know, just staying comfortable where you are and not achieving for anything. And this is a misunderstanding of compassion. And it's not also, well, I love myself, I am beautiful all the time. This is not self-compassion either. It's being able to understand that life is hard. Having a body is hard. You know, the body gets sick, it ages, it feels hunger, it feels cold, it feels hot. It's not an easy experience. However, it's the best we have.
Yes, yes. And often people tend to think, I mean, I'm including myself when I say that, we tend to want to resist certain emotions, right? We feel that something is wrong when we are experiencing difficult emotions, right? So always wanting to, you know, the idea around life we should always be happy, or life should work out for me. And this is not true. This is part of being human. As you said, there are going to be difficult times. There are going to be hunger. There are going to be things like cold and pain and difficult emotions. And to be able to sit with that, right, and to accept that, I guess, is a big part of mindfulness as well, right?
I agree. It's another unhealthy consequence of this striving and performance, high achieving culture that we live, is applying that for our emotional life. Because somehow, if we feel pain, if we are suffering, we feel we have failed. And it only increases our suffering. Because, you know, pain is there for a reason. It protects us. So the very idea that being happy or being successful means it's like a perfectionist idea that we are not going to be sad, we are not going to be in pain. It's unrealistic and creates more suffering.
Yeah, and we tend to kind of miss out on life, of half of our lives, if we are resisting suffering, because it is going to be part of, you know, anyone's life. So yeah, no, and that's quite a powerful practice to you know, to be able to realize that emotions are manageable and mentionable and natural, right? So I think
all of them.
yeah, yeah. I think you know, as health practitioners, I think often some health practitioners might be adding to this harm that we've been talking about, right? So if as a health practitioner, maybe as a nutritionist or a health coach, or someone working in the health industry, is it possible to work in this industry? Is there a way that we can change the way we practice so we don't add harm to in this regard?
Absolutely.
Mm.
I agree 100% that it's possible, but it may also be hard
Yeah.
because our training as health professionals
Mm.
is very focused on doing no harm by achieving best quality care and excellence.
Mm. Yeah.
And we get a lot of those bias from our training.
Yeah.
Their intention is not causing more harm.
Mm.
They're trying to revert or prevent harm. But as most biases are unconscious, we have to be able to start examining those biases and keep checking. Well, this, what I'm doing, how I'm practicing, is it aligned with my intention of preventing harm
Mm.
and promoting health?
Mm.
Or maybe it's not going into this direction. And so I can go back to my original intention and to my core value as a health practitioner
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be open to change.
Yes. Yeah, and not necessarily just um, aligning yourself with even your career's conditioning, right? So I think in many um, many careers, it feels like we need to be moving the client forward all the time. We need to help improve their physical health, their mental health, whatever it is, right? So to a certain degree, we are, we adding to what is right now is not necessarily good enough. So I think there's a balance, right? So it's not just about accepting who we are. Do you feel like there's something inherently wrong with wanting to be in a different space from where you are now to achieve things in life? I know that it shouldn't be the core focus, but do you feel like it could be noble to want to achieve certain things and accept where you are at right now?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we are supposed to be learning all the time and
Yeah.
changing and
Yeah.
being creative. And it's also very important to notice that, for instance, for a non-diet approach,
Mm.
we don't want to shame people for wanting to lose weight because we live in a society that there is a lot of exclusion and prejudice against people in larger bodies. So
Mm.
it's very sane to want to prevent all of that,
Mm.
to
Mm.
get more acceptance, maybe a job, maybe better treatment. So it's a very sane to do, and it comes from a place that of wanting to protect ourselves and even a
Mm.
place of love for ourselves.
Mhm. Mm.
But in the process, because of the way our culture works, it ends up creating more harm
Mm.
because weight is not a behavior.
Mhm.
It's determined for many, many complex mechanisms. And
Mm.
it's not just depending on our free will or discipline.
Mhm.
All the studies show that. It's
Mm.
one of the most difficult things to change.
Mhm.
And it's not in our control. So it's more about stopping us from creating more harm to ourselves through pursuing unachievable goals that in the process create more suffering and more harm,
Mm.
and rather of working with what we have and changing what we can change
Yeah.
and offering us the best compassionate support that we can all times.
Mm.
even when sometimes we are unable to offer that kind of compassion to ourselves.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I mean, you've been working in the industry for quite some time now. So I would love to just hear a little bit more about your own personal journey and how did you become interested in this field? Where did it all start for you?
Well, I had an eating disorder as a teenager, as a young adult, and my path through healing was very lonely because at the time here in Brazil, where I'm based, uh, there was only one place that offered care for eating disorders, and it had a very long line. So I didn't find enough support. And also, in what I got from the care that was being offered, I felt that there was so much of my experience that wasn't being addressed
Mm, mm,
because it was focusing on just the individual, on their behaviors. But so what? You're telling me this, and this, but the whole world is telling me the opposite. How am I supposed to navigate that?
yeah.
It's not just in my hands. So this is why I chose to do research and then become a provider in this field, because there's so much to be done.
Oh wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And I think that's so powerful. You know, often when we go through these experiences ourselves, we know that we see the gaps, right, in terms of what other people can really benefit from or what's missing, what was missing in our own treatment, or, you know, how isolating it sometimes is to go through these things. So, yeah, and what role? So I love how you're saying that it's not just about the individual, right? It's not just about figuring it out, changing your behavior in that moment. There's a societal element that we've talked about that plays a really big role as well. So, I mean, this is, yeah, often, you know, when we think about working with clients, you also a psychologist, right? A therapist, a narrative therapist.
A narrative
A
therapist, yes.
narrative. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and how you use that when working with clients?
Uh, well, I decided to become a therapist because I found out about narrative therapy when I was doing my PhD.
Mm,
And some of the things that I found in narrative therapy were those things that I felt that were missing from the discussion, or what the professionals that I saw when I had an eating disorder were offering.
mm,
So narrative therapy was created by two social workers. They were not psychologists. Michael White from Australia and David Epstein from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
mm,
And I had the good fortune to study under David Epstein. And that's the reason why I went to Aotearoa in my PhD, during my PhD. And one of the things that narrative therapy includes in their practice is the awareness of the competing social discourses that shape our lives and our views of ourselves and the relationships that we have with ourselves. So we can see that there is not only one way of relating, and we can choose ways that are more aligned with our wisdoms and our values and our ideas of the life that we want for ourselves.
mm, mm,
And then therapy can support those versions of our stories to come into life.
mm. Beautiful, yeah. So do you typically combine narrative therapy and mindful eating? You know, telling your clients more about mindful eating, or is there what else do you include in sessions with clients typically?
It depends. I can combine, and
Mm,
basically depends on what the client needs and what emerges from our conversations.
Yeah, of course.
So it's a client-focused approach rather than I have this approach and this is what I offer. I combine my utility belt to what the client is asking or needing at the moment.
Yeah, of course. So I just want to touch a little bit on the mindful eating side of things. So you're the co-vice chair at the Center for Mindful Eating. Can you tell us a little bit more about this nonprofit organization and what its goal and vision is?
So the Center for Mindful Eating has been there for a long time. And it was a great inspiration for me when I was starting, because I was first an anthropologist, then a narrative therapist, and then I became a mindful eating teacher. And I first learned about mindful eating when I was in New Zealand. And then when I came back to Brazil and started working with clients, and then the mindfulness practices became more popular here, I thought, wow, mindful eating could be a really good thing. So that's when I decided to become a mindful eating teacher. And at that time, the Center for Mindful Eating was a great resource for me because there were very few places that could offer reliable information and resources. So my connection with the center was first as a student and a new mindful eating teacher. And as it evolved, I became a member, and then I became a part of the board, and now I'm a vice chair.
Wonderful. So would you say that the goal or the vision of the Center for Mindful Eating is to provide people with resources to create and maintain a mindful eating practice? Or...
Yes, I think it is to hold space for the foundations of the mindful eating practice in a way that it remains solid, with the solid foundation in its core values, both as mindfulness practice and also the compassionate awareness that is required to keep that awareness. Because it's really hard to keep awareness that is not compassionate, because once we become aware, we see all the suffering that is there. Without the compassion, we just increase the suffering.
Exactly.
And with eating specifically, there are many subtleties of the kind of suffering that mindful eating is more capable of caring for.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like, you know, the mindful eating practice gives us access or can kind of let the light shine on, like you said, the things that are causing suffering, right? It kind of brings that to light. Yeah, I agree. So what is in its core for those people who maybe are listening and don't exactly know what it is? You know, what is mindful eating? So we know that it's a non-diet approach, right? So tell us a little bit more about what it is.
So the definition of mindful eating has changed a little bit throughout the Center for Mindful Eating's existence, in the way that we keep trying to refine it. But I would say that currently we would define mindful eating as the intention to be compassionately present and aware of the eating experience and all that entails it, like the context, like where eating happens, what happens afterwards. So it's not just the act of eating itself, but all of the surrounding, also the cultural and personal meanings of the food and of our relationship to food and eating and sharing food. And when we cultivate mindful eating, we reduce the judgment and are invited to go back to the connection with the body, the mind, and the heart, and honor our needs for nourishment in all levels, just not on the nutritional level.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so the basic characteristics of a mindful eater, right? So you say that there's really it's the intention of. So we recognizing that you're not, there's no rules, there's no strict definition that we need to adhere to in order to see ourselves as a mindful eater, right? So it's really the intention to become more aware of food, but not just food and the vitamins and the macros. No, that's not what it's all about. This is really about the environment, sharing of food, how the body responds to certain foods, the taste of food, right? But also, while we're doing all of this, trying to reduce the judgment that often goes with food. And also, I know you mentioned earlier, maybe the guilt and the shame that we often experience when eating, right? In order to be able to maybe reframe the eating experience again as something that's an expression of our aliveness to a certain degree, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
and also the emotions are
Mm.
very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
In order for eating to be healthy, it should be pleasurable. It
Mm.
should nourish our hearts as well as our bodies. It
Absolutely.
should be interesting. If we were all astronauts eating pills with all the nutrients that we needed, it wouldn't be healthy eating.
No.
We
No.
need to have joy. Like we talk about the culinary arts. It's a form of art, of creativity, of expression, of
Yeah.
beauty. It
Mm.
should all be there. That should have space. Eating should have the space for that kind of human expression.
Mm. And I think that's part of what's kind of sad about very extreme or dietary approaches is people tend to, the joy is taken out of the eating experience, because often it's like, chicken breasts and bland chicken breasts and watery broccoli because they feel like this is what's most nutritious. And as you're saying, this is not the only element of, you know, cherishing or looking after our bodies. Nutrition lies on many different levels. Looking after yourself from a wide variety of perspectives. I think this is taking that into consideration as well. So I'm thinking, and I know that typically many health practitioners might be listening to this podcast where they might think and might be curious around whether there is room. Is there room, according to you, for balancing physiology, for example? So let's say, playing devil's advocate, let's say someone does eat lots of sugar and it impacts their system in a certain way, where maybe they feel a drop in energy, right, after an hour or two. And then they might tell me that, but my body is asking me for more sugar, right, after that initial drop. So, is there room for taking the physiology of the body into account when it comes to mindful eating as well?
Yes, but it's interesting because before mindful eating, and because my history with an eating disorder and so many diets that I lost count of, I thought I was addicted to sugar. I thought I had to just for today, I will not eat sugar because I'm not able to control myself with sugar and so on and so forth. But the kind of awareness that I was able to develop with my mindful eating practice, I realize I don't like sugar that much. Sometimes I do, but I'm free from sugar.
Wow.
Because of the compassionate awareness that I was able to develop. I can notice that sometimes my body craves for broccoli. Sometimes it craves for pasta.
Yeah.
Because our bodies are amazing. They're wise. Can you imagine, like, if you see a wild animal in their environment, do they need to go to a dietitian to learn how to be healthy?
No, of course not.
Why not? Because the body has evolved to learn and to ask for what it needs. The problem with us humans is that we have culture, and culture messes up things a little bit because we create things like we can only have like 30 minutes break for lunch, or you are supposed to eat certain types of foods at certain hours of the day, and so on and so forth. And then we have to go to the supermarket and buy the foods that are available there. And depending on where you live, you're not going to have many choices. And so it messes up the wisdom, our access to the wisdom of our bodies. And there's also, of course, a question of social justice, because ideally, if we lived in a socially just world, that food was accessible for everyone in a good variety, we would only need to become more aware of what our bodies ask for, and then just eat what we needed. But it's more complicated than that. We have food deserts, we have massive amounts of publicity around some types of food, while other types of food are said to be, well, they're medicine. I don't like saying that food is medicine, because we have this idea that medicine is bitter or unpleasant.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, it's not a
So
compliment.
it's like, yeah, it's bad publicity for food,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
So, but apart from that, if we develop this compassionate awareness, it supports our needs for nutrition.
Yeah, so it's not about, so I hear what you say. If we're wanting to try to balance the physiology, trying to do it from an external kind of, rules and shoulds, that's not necessarily the approach that's necessarily recommended in this regard. It's more about starting to trust your own body's wisdom, right?
Yeah,
Because your
it's
body
rather
naturally,
than thinking that the nutritional information is better than what your body tells us, and then it creates a sense of mistrust.
yes,
And then I have to obey or disobey the rules.
yes.
It's like making the information about nutrition a friend to what our body is telling us.
Uh-huh. Okay, so maybe even responding. So if the external guidelines are saying, sugar is XYZ, trying to have that internal awareness of how does my body respond when I am having sugar? Is it something that yeah, does it support what I'm reading out there or not necessarily? And that's once again where individuality comes in. How does my body respond to a
Yes.
certain type of food? Right. Yeah.
And I would say trust your body first if you have cultivated enough awareness, because the external information changes all the time.
Yeah.
Our bodies, they include like millions of years of wisdom built by evolution. Nutrition science has been there for much less longer. So, and it changes. At one point we were supposed not to eat sugar and use artificial sweeteners instead. Now the MS is saying, well, artificial sweeteners, well, we can see no benefit of that. So it keeps changing, but our biology has been tested for longer.
Yes,
So as
exactly.
long as we do the work of awareness and of undoing the misconceptions that we've internalized, usually our bodies are the best source of information.
Absolutely. But you said a key aspect in all of this is to create that awareness, right? So where can someone start if they feel like they don't have that type of awareness yet, maybe?
I would recommend starting with a mindful eating training with a trained professional, because we have many resources out there. We have books, we have podcasts, we have, I don't know, apps, but there is some kind of learning, the foundation of it. I think with the human exchange from one sentient body to the other, that is important as a foundation. And then you can go on yourself. Because having this more personal connection and being able to discuss, look, what I'm noticing is this, and checking with the person that has a longer practice than that has been trained to teach, is priceless. It's you have to relearn how to read your body from someone that has done that already.
Yes, of course. I think that's where the element of community comes in as well, right? And having that support around us. You don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to figure out, the whole journey on your own. There are people who've done this before, right? So are there, I know there's lots of resources on the Center of Mindfulness for Mindful Eating's website, right? Well, there's also lots of access to different practitioners, right? Just to make sure. Yeah.
Yes, many resources. We have a huge library, and we are planning offering some bundles with specific themes to make it easier, because there are many years of content that has been produced, both for the ones that become members of the center that have access to the whole library. We have some open events for the general public just to check out. And we have a year-long planning for content to be offered to our members and the public. So yeah, there's a world of wonders at the website of the center. Please go there and check it out.
Yes, and what is the website? We'll put that in the description as well, but maybe you can just tell us where to find it. Where can listeners or our audience find the website?
If you look for TCME, the Center for Mindful Eating, on your browser, you will find us. I can't remember the exact name of the website because I'm awful with remembering things like that, like web links and numbers.
Okay, good. All right. So one last question before we end off. Do you find that even as obviously you've spent lots of time cultivating practice around mindful eating, do you find that at times, for you even, that it is sometimes easier to eat mindfully compared to other times in your life? Or do you feel like, no, it's such a strong practice that you've cultivated that it's something that supports you equally constantly? Or how does that work in your own life?
I think it's both. It is a practice that supports me constantly. It's always there, caring for me. But sometimes I mindlessly eat. It happens when I'm more stressed, when I don't get enough rest, when it's so often I also mindlessly eat while watching Netflix sometimes. It happens to all of us. We are human.
Yes.
It's not about being mindful every single second of your life. But what is gone is I think the overall imbalance, the suffering, and because I was already recovered when I found mindful eating, but the degree of joy and appreciation that I found through the mindful eating practice was something that I never thought possible.
Yeah.
Especially for me as someone that had an eating disorder in the past and had all these experiences of pain and suffering and self-torture associated with food.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I could find freedom and joy again, even more than I had before the eating disorder. It's amazing. So,
so
it's
that
always there
absolutely,
supporting me.
yeah. So you are quite confident that someone who's listening to us today, who is suffering from an eating disorder or just, disordered eating, or just experience lots of guilt and shame when it comes to eating, are you confident that full recovery is possible?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't believe in lost cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So to experience that joy and freedom around food again. And I think there's so many people who, it feels like that's all they want. They just want to experience freedom and joy around food again because it tends to take them over to a certain degree. It's all they can think about. It becomes such a big obsession in their lives, the way they look and the way they're eating in their bodies. So to be able to break free from that, I think, can open up so much space for people to start looking around them again and engaging in life in a different way again. Yeah. Thank you,
Yes.
Daniela. Thank you so much. It was really insightful, and I can really see why you've dedicated so many years to this topic, and how important it is to really unpack this and to start challenging the conditioned beliefs around this topic, and really recognizing that mindful eating, yes, it's about paying attention to our hunger and our fullness levels and being aware of this moment and the taste, but it's also bigger than that. It's also how we are holding ourselves with compassion while we're eating, also reducing that negative self-talk and seeking to trying to appreciate our bodies for the bigger whole, right? So thank you. Is there any last words from your side that you would maybe like to share with people out there?
I would like to share that maybe mindful eating might not be for everyone. It's not the magical solution for the eating difficulties for everyone in the whole world, across all cultures. But there is something about this practice that, at least in my experience and in the experience of many others that I've known and worked with, that feels like going back home.
Yeah.
I felt that my history around eating had estranged me from myself. And mindful eating was one of the ways that allowed me to feel at home again.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you. That's really beautiful, and I think many people have that experience where they just want to feel at home in their bodies again, right? So, thank you so much, Daniela. We appreciate you taking out this time to chat with us and for doing such a good job at the Center for Mindful Eating, and for putting all this info out there for everyone in order to find that freedom and joy again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zena, for having me. And maybe someone that is listening to us will benefit from this conversation.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.